Okay, 8 seconds to go. So by the time we have that time, we can see what you had in your lunch. For a change, I had a dal rice today with curd, one of my favorite dish, dal rice and curd. I know that sounds like a weird combination for some, but I loved it. Okay, cool. So if you're there, enter in the chat window what you had in your lunch. Cool. So by the time you are doing that, we have Dalai. Dalai, you're all set for the next Bollywood quiz. So before that, what you had in your lunch, Dalai?
I had honestly the best leftover chicken curry from a birthday party last night. It was top notch.
Oh, a belated happy birthday, Dalai. I was not doing that.
It wasn't my birthday, but thank you. I'll take it. You're 2 months early, but I'll take it.
Oh, okay. Great. So Dalai, all yours. You can start with the Bollywood poll.
All right. Let's go. Let's have the next poll up. I hope you guys aren't too sleepy from your lunch. I hope your brains are ready and firing away. Let's pull up the next poll.
It's up.
All right. Okay. So I cannot see it right now, but I'm going to trust that you guys can.
Which Bollywood personality has been conferred with the French distinction of Knight of the Order of Arts?
Okay, so the question is, which Bollywood personality has been conferred with the French distinction of Knight of the Order of Arts and Letters? It's a real niche question, but I'm sure somebody's gonna get it. Okay, keep on voting. You have a couple more seconds. Okay, should we wrap it up or should we give people more time? What do you think, Naveen?
We're ending it.
I think we are done.
Okay, all right. Let's see the results. Can anybody read the results out to me? Because I'm not.
Naveen can read them out for you. They're up.
Yes. So, the poll. Okay. So Deepika Padukone, 24%, Kalki, 29%, Priyanka Chopra, 39%, and Kareena Kapoor, 8%. So most of them are going for Priyanka Chopra.
Well, I have to let you know that the right answer is Kalki because, fun fact, she is actually of French origin and grew up in Pondicherry. So she was awarded this for strengthening ties between our French neighbors and us.
Oh, that's awesome to know, Dalai.
Yeah,
that was a nice quiz. Thank you so much, Dalai, for the
no worries. Back
poll.
to you.
Awesome. Now, since we had a lunch break, sometime after lunch, we feel a bit low. So what we can do is, in the classroom sessions, we have a different environment. In the conference hall, we can hear the noise, we can hear the humming sound, right? But on Zoom is not possible. So what we can do is, now since you're sitting in your home, anyway, it doesn't matter if you're traveling somewhere by watching this on a phone, whatever you do, it doesn't matter where you are, okay? It can be as weird as possible. The moment I say 3, 2, 1, you have to say yay. Okay, everyone, even the panelists, all the speakers, and everyone in the audience. I know I can't hear you, but I can feel you. So unmute yourself, or maybe you can just do it loudly, just to motivate yourself, just to pump up after that post-lunch session. So 3, 2, 1. You have to say yay. 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 Awesome. Now with this, we'll go for the next session. This is on Startup Showcase. And we have Peter here. Peter, post-lunch, excited?
Yeah. So, I'm in a different time zone, so it's not exactly lunch for me, but yes, I had a nice 30-minute break.
Oh, that's awesome. So all yours, Peter, the Startup Showcase.
Thanks, Nevin. So yeah, in these sessions, after the R3 developer relations team, we spend the whole morning introducing you to our product and technology. I actually would like to introduce all to 2 of our startups in the community. One is called, let me share my screen. So one is called SCB TechX, and the second one is called Downsizers. So in these sessions, I will actually bring the two. One is the innovation lead, one is the co-founder to the stage, and they will introduce you their solutions and their technologies. So first, we have SCB TechX. We have Andre Chen in the stage with us right now. Andre, do you mind to come to the stage?
Hi, can you hear me well?
Yes, we can hear you. Yeah, feel free to do your presentation.
Will do. Let me share my screen and get the presentation up first. Can you guys see the screen well and the slides well?
Looks
yes,
great.
We can.
Okay, cool. So hi everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you guys are tuning in from. My name is Andre. I'm just gonna give a quick introduction to myself, and then I'm gonna jump into some of the use cases and stuff that we actually do in SCB TechX. So my background has always been in cloud architecture. So it started with APIs, it started with microservices back about like 5-6 years ago. And I've always been kind of like a blockchain enthusiast myself. Something when, especially when we were looking at 2016, 2017, when blockchain started to like slowly start to flourish and whatnot. And we have seen a large amount of like progress, I think, made on blockchains, whether is it on permission, private blockchains, public blockchains. And I want to kind of like cover all of these items from a company perspective. So for those of you who do not know, SCB TechX actually is a startup that actually is also a subsidiary of SCB. SCB stands here for Siam Commercial Bank. So I'm actually based in Bangkok, and it's the third largest bank over here in Thailand. And the reason why I think like I'm really happy to be here today is because we have been seeing a lot of change, and this is where I'm going to start, I think, my presentation, right? So over the last like 2.5 years, especially like 2019, 2020, we have seen a very large amount of change as well as like development in the finance world. It doesn't matter whether you're talking about traditional finance, you're talking about like centralized finance, or whether you're talking about DeFi, right? And this is where you can slowly start to see the progress of how many companies, be it Facebook, be it like large banks like JP Morgan, et cetera, that are bringing in a lot of investment funding into blockchain. Their perspectives can be a little bit different when it comes to like cryptocurrency or whatnot. But I think we are all in the same camp that as a technology, blockchain is actually changing a lot of how we are rethinking the architectures of tomorrow, right? Especially in the financial and insurance sectors. And that is not all, right? Because CBDC and global regulatory changes is something that has also kind of like evolved along the years. And you see like, so I'm based in Thailand. I know the guys who are based in like Europe and whether, America, they have all very different takes when it comes to like things like central bank digital currency. And one of the largest hot topics that we actually have right here in Thailand, especially in the ASEAN region, together with Singapore, together with Hong Kong, is actually about CBDC, right? And you will see that so many types of sandboxes are actually slowly, opening up to the world. Us over here in Thailand itself, we actually are opening up the pilot for CBDC in the next year. And now the banks are starting to understand that with this type of new digital currency liquidity that's going to be introduced, right? What are they really going to do? And they have to start thinking about how do we actually support things that are digital assets, right? And I'm not talking about just cryptocurrency. I think like as many mentioned before, digital assets are not just cryptocurrency. And I will show you a couple of different use cases as we go along, as I introduce the stuff that we do. So I think let's take a step back and look at what actually creates a very strong blockchain platform core, right? Especially from a banking sector, from a sector where there are a lot of legacy items, a lot of like security requirements, a lot of data, some that are very sensitive, be it customer data, transaction data, or whether is it about knowing who you are, right? And rethinking about the concepts of what KYC really means, what identity really means in our industry. And if you take a look at that, at the end of the day, what we really are looking at is an infrastructure play that allows all of our subsidiaries, all of like the companies under Siam Commercial Bank to kind of like think about their use cases, whether they should be sitting on public blockchain, whether they should be sitting on private blockchain, and create a common infrastructure holdings that allows everyone to kind of like think about how they want to engage their community based on the types of data structures that we have. And I will definitely go into a little bit more detail when I go into the next section when I talk about architectures and stuff. So I'm just going to lay out a couple of different business use cases that we have spent quite a lot of time on, right? As you all know, digital wallets and digital currencies are definitely on top of everyone's mind. This has got to do with things like custodianship. This has got to do across like the asset management space, but also this actually has got to do with things like loans, microloans. And microloans are a really big thing over here in Thailand. And the way that we are thinking about this is how can we actually get, a good amount of information and help those people that are actually unbanked. Thailand has a very, very large sector that's actually unbanked. And the bank themselves actually do want to capture some of these people, but they cannot support them because like you have multiple rural regions, and this is happening across many types of like developing countries, especially I think as you guys all know, with the situation of COVID, where travel is difficult, where everything is kind of like tight for many of the people. How do we actually get to them, right? And the concepts of CBDC, the concepts of like a wallet and the concept of digital currency really starts to come into play. The second group of use cases being financial instruments. This is something that I think we are all already quite aware of, but I want to also give a different take to things that are financial instruments. So you think about stocks, you think about equity, debt, bonds, whatever not. But have we started to think about how can we actually do loaning and collateralizations of loans, right, with tokenization? How can we try to change the concept of like what gold really means, and how can we actually use that for the average person to collateralize their loan into a digital currency? How do they actually use their motorcycle to actually become something where they have proof of ownership? These are the financial instruments that we are all thinking about in terms of how does blockchain actually forward this concept and educate the people. And the last one, I think, is all related to identity. Now, identity as a data exchange is something that has been discussed for a very long time. For countries that are actually executing PDPA rules, PDPA laws, you begin to realize that there is a lot of data that has actually basically been lost track of. You find like somebody being able to like, make a call to your telephone number, your mobile number, but you don't know where your number actually got shared from. The question now is how can we return the ownership of the identity back to the users, number one. And number two, maybe in the future, create some kind of ecosystem that allows you to own all of the data, whether is it biomedical data, financial data, KYC data, etc., and then start to then interact with all of the ecosystems based on your digital identity that is marked by an entity, which is like your digital wallet. And I think there are many other use cases over here that I think in the earlier sessions as well has brought up, right? So like for things like, how do we make sure that we are strongly identified in the blockchain so that we know that the transactions are not going to be fraudulent? How do we actually continuously keep data secure and like data in transition especially, right? And a lot of these questions are going to come into play, and I will talk about it a little bit more again in the architecture section, where I want to bring a couple of different very key points up when we are thinking about blockchain architectures and data architectures in blockchain. This slide, I think I just want to just call out really like the areas of market potential and customer growth that we are really heavily looking at. Siam Commercial Bank has already been investing in a lot of cross-border payments, and they have actually run a very successful program back from 2017 that is based on Ripple. So some of you may know Ripple, Ripple in the open community. We actually use Ripple for a lot of cross-border payments and remittance. This is something that has increased the so-called liquidity that we have actually managed. And now we are trying to think about what new era can payments actually be thinking about with the introduction of CBDC, as well as how we actually want to expand our blockchain applications. There are other things that require like loans and proof of assets, and trade financing is a very big business over here in Thailand as well. One of the very successful cases that actually came from a subsidiary under Siam Commercial Bank, it was a company called Digital Ventures. They are a full trade financing firm that runs all of their trade financing on blockchain, as well as R3 Corda, right? and then so on and so forth, where you can just kind of think about all the use cases that your companies will be looking for in the future. But these are the areas that we are definitely looking at as of today. And one really great simple example, people may be very familiar with like the NFT type of marketplace in the open blockchain system. We actually decided to kind of like also relate a little bit of like a simple program, right? And if you rethink about like loyalty and you think about bank business, they have a lot of credit card points, they have a lot of like ways that you can earn like points here and there. But how can blockchain actually change the concept of loyalty when you know that there is a lot of so-called silos within loyalty programs as well, between business units, between whatever not. And we feel that like a use case like loyalty is a very, very good application of blockchain, because you actually allow strong ownership of the asset. And this can be coming in the form of NFTs, non-fungible tokens, fungible tokens being your exchange token, semi-fungible tokens that allow you to kind of like control what is actually still valuable, not valuable, and actually has like a certain kind of like mark on your smart contracts. You can actually then allow people to transact with each other P2P, and you can actually just basically change all of the concepts that a typical inventory management system where you try to onboard the customers into your loyalty program completely by looking at everything that is tokenizable, and at the same time with a digital signature that's always heavily authorized by each of the users, verified entities on the blockchain, so that you can take away all the third-party scams and whatnot that happen very, very commonly in e-commerce marketplaces at all. And this is also one of the use cases that we are looking at in terms of like building up that capability, because it involves a lot of the pillars of what I showed just now: digital identity, digital wallets, currencies, tokenization, and so on and so forth. And you can think that the number of upsells that are potentially there is really, really infinite. So I've spoken a lot, I think, on like business perspectives, right? And what should we actually kind of like look at if we're looking at market positioning? Now, this is a dev conference, and I'm not the most technical person around, and I hope that I can like answer any of the questions if you do have later on. But I just want to give some perspectives of how we actually think of blockchain, and what I think a lot of people do not talk about when they just bring up the word blockchain. So to me, this is a very important slide, because when we talk about blockchain, people just assume Ethereum, people just assume Solana, Avalanche, whatever, not blah, 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 right? But what really kind of like defines and differentiates your type of use case is actually kind of like where you want your blockchain to be. Are you in a permissionless space, or are you in a permission space? Are you in a private space, or are you in a public space? And I put it over here, I think, as a guide for you to kind of like think about. On the left side, right, you will see the blockchain architecture and data infrastructure. The ownership of that would decide whether you want to be placed in a public space or a private space. A lot of data, for example, you do not want to be placed in public spaces, because you know that some of your entities need to transact with each other, and you do not want to share the data with the other tenants themselves. The other one, when you're talking about like network participants, right, and about like being able to look at who is actually part of your blockchain infrastructure. And I think this is something very important when you need to decide what type of technology that you're actually trying to kind of like use in your so-called like businesses or use cases and decision making. And today, I want to just focus a little bit on the bottom right axis, right? The bottom right, the quadrant over here, where you would see the places of like people like Corda, which we are part of over here, people like Quorum and Consensus and Hyperledger. They all have their own pros and cons, right? And really depending on how we kind of like apply these blockchains and how we actually look at our use cases, you need to get this very, very straight. As an architect, as a developer, I think this is very important to understand about like ownership. But how does this actually relate, I think, to the next point, right? Which is actually about the expected future of CBDC and how we actually see it. And again, I mentioned this because CBDC is a very large topic in banks, very, very large topic, because all the central banks are trying to like scramble to actually decide how do we actually want to do this in terms of controlling liquidity, controlling like token minting, et cetera, right? And when you see that there are two different types of so-called like tiers that we're looking at, one, which is like the tier one kind of like ledger where everything is private in between the banks and the central bank, and two, where all the businesses are made, where all the omni-channel partners are, you start to begin to realize that the understanding of whether you want to be in a permissioned private blockchain versus a public permissioned or a public permissionless blockchain becomes a very important consideration, because the amount of control that you actually really want to put out from here until like your end customer, should it just be via APIs? Should it be via like deployments into your dApp infrastructure? Do you want them to actually really onboard apps? How do you control these applications and verify these wallets? All of these kinds of things begin to kind of like add up, right? So you need to be able to be flexible enough to kind of think about blockchain not as a single entity like we are, but instead like how I'm trying to like narrate it right now, which is that blockchain, choosing your correct space, choosing the best solution for that fit, and then placing it over there, while thinking about how does liquidity actually kind of like move in between each of the blockchains. And this is where I think I want to bring up three very core principles in blockchain. Number one, you know that you have to be able to scale securely. This is by far, I think, the most important, because if you want to be able to support a number of customers, you want to actually grow your businesses, this is number one. Number two is a very large, hotly debated topic, which is decentralization. Now, decentralization, I think you want to achieve it, but at the same time, in which area do you actually want to be decentralized? And how does decentralization play a role for something like Corda, where you might be actually kind of like relating Corda to a very centralized type of network? The question you should then start to ask yourself is, what are you actually really trying to decentralize? And I'll give you an example later on. And the third one is interoperability, because as we know in the blockchain world, it's not just because you have a blockchain and you build on a single blockchain that everything comes, but you need to be able to work with multiple chains, and being able to bridge across multiple chains really creates that ecosystem and network effect. And you can really very strongly see it in the open blockchain world. You've seen how many blockchains actually have EVM compatible bridges, for example, because they want to be able to be compatible with the Ethereum guys, right? Because the Ethereum network is the largest. You've seen how people actually have created bridges between different types of blockchains that work on totally different types of proof, right? It could be a proof of stake to a proof of history to a proof of whatever not. These are the bridges that actually allow money to flow, ecosystems to flow, and innovation to flow at the same time. And I will put all of this into our thinking when it comes to R3 Corda. So this is a kind of like a high-level architecture that I think everyone is probably familiar with, because this is not an architecture that we're looking at specifically for blockchain. We are talking about an overall architecture about scaling, not just Corda, but scaling everything that will support Corda and support your blockchain platform and your blockchain core, right? And this is where you have to have your considerations for things like shared services, operations, off-chain items, and like, which cloud are you really trying to do? Are you a Linux-based organization? Are you a Azure-based organization? What is your tech stack when it comes to events-driven architecture? How do you actually intend to do all of that to scale the core? Because your job is to make sure that no matter how good a software is, that you are not allowing the core to be the only thing that is doing your work, right? And I think on the first high level, when it comes to scalability, it's not just about scaling Corda, right? Because Corda is just another piece of software. A lot of like considerations have to go into how do you scale the network? How do you scale your virtual machines as a whole? The second one, I think, is about decentralization. And this is a very good example of like choosing what do you actually want to decentralize, right? There's a very, very good use case between Corda and Hedera Hashgraph, where you actually use Hedera Hashgraph as the decentralized store of trust, while all of your information and your transactions continue to happen in the private space, right? So meaning that you can actually allow a decentralized entity such as like Hedera Hashgraph to store your transaction hashes and whatnot, decide what information you actually want out of your blockchain, and so that it can be openly audited and also achieve a certain level of decentralization, not just processing power, but now we're talking about decentralizing trust to a different network. And last but not least is cross-chain interoperability. And this is something that I think is the most exciting for me when it comes to Corda, because Corda is known to not actually be very interoperable with many different blockchains. But recently, there has been a study with this lab, right, at Tech, where they have started to actually allow different types of tokens and different types of blockchains to interact with Corda. And this is something that has been progressing for the last 3 to 6 months, and something that we are really looking out for, because it is also a very essential item that is going to make a lot of make or break decision points when we are thinking about whether if let's say we are using Corda as our core system, how do we then start to bridge it to the other use cases that may sit in open DeFi spaces, in open permission, other so-called public permission blockchain use cases, right? In many of the different sense. So this is kind of I guess a high level of where we have been looking at from an architecture standpoint and from a technology research standpoint on how we actually can use Corda's strengths, while at the same time also looking out for where Corda is going towards from a roadmap perspective, as well as how they're going to continue to develop the software. And I'm just going to wrap it up here, and I think give some time for Q&A if we do have that. And Peter, I'm going to hand it back to you.
Yes, I think we have some time for Q&A. We have 4 more minutes, but I don't see any in the chat. There's one question about what is CBDC, but you basically have second half of your question answering CBDC. So then I have a question. So do we actually see this project coming into the pipeline soon, or in a couple of months, or what's the timeline for this project?
So actually, we have taken the initiative to actually go through and actually purchase R3 CBDC sandbox as well. We know very clearly that they are definitely one of the favorites when it comes to this CBDC project in the Bank of Thailand itself. So we are looking actually and working very closely together with the bank IT to actually think about what kind of use cases they want to do, because the reality is that we have to ease a lot of these people into blockchain. I think we spend a lot of time researching and testing technology that is about 2 years ahead of its own time, and that's the reason why you would see that investments have to be made, number one. But number two, the more important part is education, and that pipeline is getting very close. It's definitely one of the big pipelines that we are already in progress doing it.
All right, thank you. Thanks, Andrew. I'm gonna ask you a favor. So can you share some of the links? Just drop in the chat, and then so people can they want to learn more about it, they can use your link and then see themselves.
Sure, no problem. I'll drop a couple of reference links in a while.
All right. Thanks, Andrew. So that's Andrew Chen, innovation lead at SCB TechX. And again, if you guys have any questions, feel free to email him. It's andrehonghan.chen@scbtechx.io. So again, SCB is a subsidiary of the CM Commercial Bank Group, focusing on delivery best-in-class innovation solutions and perform across industries. So thanks, Andrew. So next we have our second startup showcase, which is Downsizer, which came from different region of the APAC area. We actually have the managing director, Mark, in the chat, so he will actually answer any questions himself, but he had prepared a video for all of us today, just because some of the time conflict on his teammate. So let's all see the video that he prepared for us. Kevin, can we have the video up?
Here we go. Hi everyone, my name is Mark McDuffie from Downsizer.com. Downsizer.com is a transformative new PropTech platform from Australia that allows home buyers with sufficient equity in their existing dwelling to buy new property without the need for a cash deposit. Together with my co-founders, we have almost 90 years of relevant experience in property, infrastructure, and in my case, technology, digital design, and innovation. Personally, I've worked for more than in 5 different countries, delivering innovative technology solutions in the financial services industry. And up until 2 years ago, led a large team in Commonwealth Bank, which is Australia's largest bank. Downsizer has a mission to provide a secure and affordable way to downsize into your new home. People downsize for many reasons, perhaps for a simpler lifestyle, or to live closer to their grandkids, or to create a safety net for retirement. And with a rapidly aging population, there is a massive untapped opportunity in developed countries of people who are asset rich and cash poor and want to move into more appropriate housing. In Australia alone, downsizers are forecast to release $1.7 trillion of residential property as baby boomers elect for a better lifestyle and equity release. But buying and selling property off the plan can be quite a daunting experience. It can be expensive, risky, and inefficient. For downsizers or purchasers, finding the deposit to secure your future home can mean uprooting your life, and we think unnecessarily draining your nest egg early. For property developers, banks continue to make it harder to release construction finance or lending. You're required to prove up to 100% of debt cover through pre-sales. But what happens if the market drops between when you sell a property to a purchaser and when they settle? That can be up to 3 years between exchange and settlement. This was crystallized at the first 3 to 6 months of COVID in Australia, where weaker demand and uncertainty led to lower valuations. Basically in Australia, the banks, if they lend in principle to buyers of property to give a mortgage, they reserve the right 90 days from settlement to revalue the property being delivered and reevaluate the serviceability. This meant that more than 3,000 transactions fell through in the first 3 months of COVID, where off-the-plan dwellings failed to settle due to valuation. This meant that $87 million was actually given up in deposits alone. So nobody wins in this case. The opportunity as we see it here in Australia has a rapidly aging population that increasingly controls the majority of the residential property and wealth. For baby boomers looking for ways to improve their income and lifestyles, downsizing is an integral part of these specific needs. We expect forecast 1.6 million individuals will release $1.7 trillion of residential property. And this age group or segment has a high propensity to buy new dwellings, with 55% of new properties being purchased by the 55 and above sector. And the last point here that's really important to set for context is in Australia, the government created a tax incentive for downsizers downsizing their primary dwelling. Releasing equity meant that they could contribute $300,000 additional to their superannuation without being taxed. That's $600,000 per couple. And in the first 2.5 years of that incentive, 22,000 individuals contributed $3.4 billion of additional super to their savings. Our minimum viable product will tie together 3 key players in the market: purchasers and downsizers, property developers, and estate agents. So we've created Downsizer.com, which is a digital home buying experience unlike any other. We use a suite of APIs to make every step fast and painless and automatically validate critical information during the application process. But at the same time, we also deliver qualified leads for future sales. Developers have a sophisticated back-end profile that displays their complete portfolio of listings, and they can also export the sales ledger at the click of a button for all the information the bank needs to release construction funding. So Downsizer empowers buyers to purchase the perfect home in a simple, safe, and cost-effective way. It also enables developers to hit their pre-sales number faster with reduced risk. So we have lots of features, but the 2 key points to remember are that we allow people to buy off-the-plan dwellings with no cash deposit. So downsizers don't need to pay a cent until settlement. And second, if the property sale falls through and sells for less, we make up the difference for the developer. So our roadmap at the moment, we're just approaching pilot launch, which is a subset of our minimum viable product. Basically, we will allow people that wholly own an existing dwelling to buy new apartments or units off the plan of a lesser value. Then we move on to stage 2, which is technically no different, but the market is bigger. And really what we're saying here is everybody that wholly owns a property can buy any new dwelling of a lesser value. So that would be houses and land purchase, townhouses and high-rise units. Stage 3 becomes really interesting because what we'll be able to do with open banking and more integration is that we can prove the net equity position of purchasers. So anyone with a net equity position in eligible assets with a greater value buying any dwelling, so whether it's new or old, can use our product. This increases the market to about 400,000 residential property sales per annum. Downsizer has been designed born and bred in Australia. We understand the market well, but we've designed this for scale globally from its first line of code. Any jurisdiction with similar patterns of substantial growth in property value, mature legal title registries, legal system, and a large growing population of over 55s meet this need. That's why we've identified New Zealand, the US, UK, Canada, and Singapore as our next targets post-Australian pilot. And that's partly why we've chosen R3's Corda platform, which will allow us to transfer across similar markets with ease and speed in the future. We use Corda really in the MVP phase to tie together 3 key elements from 3 key personas: the purchaser, the property developer, and our deposit bond contract provider. We capture all the key information of the property purchase through until completion, such as the purchaser details, their existing property details, the land title details, completion dates, asset value ratios, and of course the bond contracts and the bond contract for sale. With that, I'll hand over to Dashana from our technology partner Mitra Innovation, and he'll take you through the technical implementation of Downsizer on Corda. Thanks.
Thank you, Mark. Hi, I'm Darshan Rajapaksa, Solution Architect from Mitra Innovation with 15 years of industry experience in building various enterprise-grade solutions. I'm a blockchain enthusiast and a code expert. I am attached to Mitra for the past 5 years. We are a global technology company who provides wide spectrum of services, helping business around the globe to their business transformation journeys, from ideating their business ideas to implement and run it. Mitra is operating out of 4 locations and are providing services in 20 plus countries for 70 plus clients. We are specialized in web mobile platform development, enterprise middleware integration, and data analysis. In addition to that, Mitra is a blockchain and cloud specialist. We have partnered with Downsizer in building their very innovative Downsizer.com solution. Downsizer platform is a web platform running on Azure facilities, providing end-to-end downsizing journeys between property developers and buyers. In our application, there are 2 components. One is public-facing marketplace, and the other one is permission application for the property developers and agents. We have followed the modularized architecture, which will be expandable and which will be supported scaling in future. We have currently integrated 4 third-party services. First one is asset validation, and the second one is ID check. Third one is bankruptcy check, and the last one is land title check. Like this, we can integrate any number of third-party services in future also. As per the Corda implementation, as Mark mentioned, we capture key contract details of new house, purchasers details. All the changes to these states are captured in our DLT as well. So other than that, we validate all the agreed business rules using a smart contract. Currently, we have a very simple Corda implementation for the MVP. We have Downsizer.com, which represents seller and also property developer, and we have the bond provider, and all the contracts are between smart contracts are between these 2 parties. and all the transactions and all the flows are happening also between these two parties. And other than that, we have a notary node. This is future state. This is our ultimate Corda network. As you can see, we have downsizer.com in the middle, and we have there are other partners partnered with downsizer.com and build a huge Corda network. So as you can see, there is construction. There are construction lenders, property developers, fund providers, or probably we can say insurers, reinsurers, conveyancers, and regulation bodies like government. In this space, we are unlocking a huge number of benefits. We have listed some of them are here. Transparency of deployment project risk, real-time capital management for insurers, reduce premiums for risk coverage, faster sales process for developers, lower construction lending fees, improved regularity governance. Ultimately, all of this efficient cycle is made available real-time data, risk management, and price optimization. We are Downsizer.com and Mitra are very excited to travel towards this envisioned state along with Corda. Keep in touch with us. You can contact me, or you can contact Mark, or you can contact Downsizer directly. Thank you very much.
Thanks. So that was a video presentation from Downsizer, and as all you can know, Mark is actually in the chat, actually talking to different people in the chat. So, and now we are bringing Mark to the sessions. Say hello to everybody, Mark.
Hey everyone, thanks for listening, and thanks for the opportunity to present. Sorry it wasn't as technical as some people may like, but I'm here to answer as many questions as I can.
Yeah, it's definitely great. So I mean, please, audience, bear with me. And we know that you are very technical audience, but some of our partners, they work really hard to build the ecosystem, because if you have a community only full of developers, it's not gonna work. So we need to we are here to support our startups and ecosystem participants in the chat. And let's see. So I do see there are a couple of questions actually asking you that talking about like Japan, different regions of the world running into similar problems. So do you mind to share a little bit more from your experience that how it look like in Australia, like the real estate industry?
Yeah, one of the reasons we actually chose the Corda platform for us was the bilateral nature of the arrangements, and it would allow us to, once we deployed in Australia, I feel like we can scale to jurisdictions that have a similar pattern, right? And that is a business and technology pattern. The business pattern being large residential property value growth in the last, let's say, 10 to 20 years, mature digital capabilities. So think about APIs, land title registries being digitized, valuations of properties being digitized, and then think about the mature or similar legal construct. So whether we have smart contracts on Corda or a DLT platform, you still need, in most jurisdictions, obviously, the legal back-to-backs with that. So that's the contract for sale, contract for purchase, purchase of off-the-plan dwellings. All of that needs to be kind of mirrored, if you like, in the jurisdiction of choice. Japan is definitely something that we'd looked at, but I've connected with Sangat on that separately. I'd love to hear more about that opportunity. Where our roadmap is Australia first, US, UK, Canada, Singapore, and New Zealand. We feel there's parallels there and opportunities, but this is not limited, right?
All right, thanks, Mark. So again, everybody, that's Downsizer, and who was speaking is Mark, the managing director from Downsizer. And if you have any questions, feel free to connect him on LinkedIn or You have his email on the screen, mark@downsizer.com. Thank you, Mark. And previously, Andre, thank you. So back to you, Nevin.
Oh, thank you so much, Peter. I'm back. Music. Where am I? Yeah. I love that music. Okay, I know a lot of people don't know about this, but I love to dance. The only problem is I can't do it on Zoom. But anyway, next time when we have a conference live, I will show you some steps. Anyway, so let's get started with the next one. So we have a code challenge coming up, but before that, we have a Slido. So we'll do the Slido, but before, yeah, let's do the Slido first, and then we'll move towards the Bolly quiz, right? So we enjoy both. So let's start with the Slido.